Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. Today's topic is navigating the mid progress plateau. And as always, I'm one of your co hosts, Dr. Joe Hamlett, and alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. So, Dave, let's jump right into this. What is navigating the mid progress plateau? What does that mean to you?
Joe, this is a great topic that you and I came up with the other day. And, when we talk about mid-career professionals or individuals that are, working on a project or a process, whether it's, I'm going to go back to working out at the gym, something I still need to do. You sometimes you reach a plateau in your career, whatever level you're at, you know, or a plateau in your progression, what if you're working out, like I've plateaued and because I haven't gone to the gym and I probably should. That's probably a reason my plateau, but you plateau and you stop gaining the muscle or getting the speed, or you've lost your momentum or just kind of stagnated in your position where everyone respects you or has the same perception of you, but you want to move up or you want to move over into another department or learn something a little bit different or go out on your, what do you do about that? How do you navigate that? And that's really what we're focusing on this week, is navigating that mid progress plateau. It can be a personal goal, it can be professional, it can be career, like we've said so many times. But how do you navigate that? How do you fix that issue of being plateaued? And sometimes plateauing is a normal part, like in working out at the gym, when you're running or bicycling or, lifting weights or CrossFit or whatever, you reach a plateau where your performance is just kind of there. And at one time you'd have been super happy with that. Like that's the goal. I've done it. And now you're just there and you're kind of like, well, I want that a little bit more. I want to go to that next level. So how do we navigate the mid progress plateau? And the way you do that, or one of the ways you do that, is identifying what's causing the plateau. Have you done the same process over and over and over and over, and you haven't switched it up or changed it or refined it, or you've refined it to the point where you're at, but now it's time to reevaluate and redefine what needs to be refined? I'm going to pause there.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Dave, you brought up a very good point. I think the challenge for most of us is probably going to be identifying that we've plateaued, that we've reached maybe a goal or a milestone we set for ourselves. And then we're left thinking, what do I do now? Or what do I do next? And I think it goes back to, I think you touched on it, having a plan or an overall objective, your end state, where you're trying to go, because if you've got to a point where you're doing it with your eyes closed, say it's a process that uh, maximize to the point to where you can't do any more with it, then maybe it's that time to revisit it, take a look at it. Maybe there's something that you can improve upon. But if you just continue to do the same thing, again, you're going to get the same results. And I'll kind of compare it to when I first was bike riding years ago, and I started, the first time I rode the bike, I rode probably a mile, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is terrible." Then the next day I went back out, and it wasn't the very next day, but the next time I went back out, it was 2 miles, and then I continued to move forward, and it really got to a point where I went from, 1 mile for my first ride to ultimately getting to 30 miles. That was my goal at that point, but I had to look at it. I had to
Now, on your
evaluate.
bike, I'm going to interject here. On your
Yeah.
bike, are you talking your motorcycle? You only did one
No, this
mile
is
the first time, or a
no,
bicycle? Okay,
this
because
is
I could
a
be, if you could only
actual
do
pedal
1 mile
bike.
on a motorcycle and then you work
Yeah,
up to 30 miles, that's different than a
yeah.
bicycle.
No, I should have specified, but yeah, this was a pedal bike.
Okay.
And then I started with that 1 mile, and then progressed up to the expectation for myself was that I go, a minimum of 20 every time I went out. Versus again, I didn't continue to go past 30, but to me, that was a huge milestone. I've reached it. And so then I really had to think of ways to, if I didn't want to go past 30 miles, then what else can I do? Can I make it more aggressive? Can I ride up hills instead of just all downhills? I mean, what can I do to improve the process or to continue to improve in some way that maybe doesn't extend past 30 miles? So that was kind of the challenge that I had when I was riding a bike. again, once I reached that goal, I had to figure out different ways to, make it more appealing, still gain something from it, even if I'm still doing that maxed out mile. So that may be some of the things you might need to think about. Again, if you've got a process that you just can do it in your sleep, or that it no longer has any excitement, or doesn't, excite you to move forward or anything like that, then maybe it's time to reevaluate to see what you can do to improve upon it, or to make it more exciting, or to make it, make you want to do something with it or move forward.
Joe, that reminds me of, after I completed my master's degree, because I did my bachelor's and master's back to back like you did.
Right.
And I had completed my master's or my doctorate, or I'm sorry, I completed my bachelor's degree the same month that I got out of the military for the last time. So I went right into my master's degree and I started working for this big company about a year later. And, I come with a master's degree. I'm happy. I'm doing things. I took a job that I didn't necessarily want, but I got my foot in the door. I got another job and it was a little bit better. And then I finally was feeling good about things. I'd been promoted a couple of times, and I realized I'd kind of plateaued. It's like it was a very engineering heavy organization and I was not an engineer. I was, you know, on the business side of things. And so I realized that I'd kind of plateaued there after a couple of years. And by that time there, I'd been there several years. And I'm like, well, I'm not an engineer, so I can't move up in engineering. I I can't go into these places because I have my area of expertise. So I'd actually have to step way down, and I didn't want to do that. So I was looking at, how do I get to that next level? At that point, 9 years in, my career had plateaued literally. I mean, I was doing what I was doing what I was doing. I enjoyed it, but I wanted more responsibility. I wanted to get into management or program management or something like that. And I wound up saying to myself, the only way I'm going to do that is if I look for a job with another organization.
Right.
And to do that, one, I recognized I'd hit my plateau. I'm not, it's going to be another 5 years before I get a promotion, unfortunately. So am I going to be good with doing what I'm doing for another 5 years, which means I've been doing it for 7 years? And I decide, no, I'm not. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to apply to another organization. That was one way I'd plateaued. I was looking at my certifications. Do I have what it takes to go into that organization? Do I have an education to go into that organization? Yes, I do have an education to get into that organization, but what else do I need? I need to start documenting on my resume everything that I've done to show my value, that I can do that position that I've applied for, and what I've done that goes above and beyond that to really shine for that organization so they're getting the maximum bang for the buck and I can ask for something reasonable. And that's what I did. The next thing I did, so identify the plateau, I identified what I need to do, which was I need to go to another organization. I started identifying, what do I need to do that? Well, for in this case, I needed to revamp my resume almost completely. I had to redo a cover letter completely, and I had to bone up on my interviewing skills. And then the other thing I had did is start bouncing it off of trusted people in my network. I didn't go to like 50 people. I selected like two or three. What are your thoughts on my resume? What are your thoughts on this? Can we do a mock interview with with managers that did interviews? And I
Right.
did that several times, not just once, not twice, not three, but about a half a dozen times. And I know that seems like a lot of time to the audience. It's like, wow, you're putting a lot into that. But I got the job and I got the top dollar that I wanted with the company I wanted in a position that I wanted. So when you realize that you've plateaued, there is a process that goes along with correcting that path. Just like
Right.
working out. I remember early on in the military, I went into the, I know I'm taking up a little bit of time, but I went in the military weighing about 145 pounds. I was just a little skinny dude.
Right.
By the time I got out of tech school, I was like 155. It's like 6 months later, I felt big. I was like, yeah, I'm big. I gained 10 pounds. I'm muscle. And then I got to my first base, and there's almost all the guys were working out and they're big. And I'm like, well, I'm 155. How do I get to 160, 165?
Right.
And so when I hit 160, 165, I was like, ho, ho, ho. I was like, yes, I'm big. And it's like, well, I'm not big, but I'm big compared to what I used to be. And then I
Right.
plateaued for a while. And then, the guys that were kind of coaching me in working out and lifting, they're like, well, try this, try that. You've done what you need to do to get this level. To get to the next level, now you need to do this. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me to do that in the beginning? And they're like, you can't
Right.
skip
Yeah.
levels. You have to go through the process. And then when I did that, I gained another 10 pounds. And I was like, I was happy. You follow the process, but when you start to plateau, then you have to revisit and reevaluate. What do you need to do to get to the next level?
Well, Dave, I think you brought up a very good point. But I think a lot of us don't get to that point, and you said you identified that you plateaued, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge for
Yeah, that's
people.
where it starts.
Yeah, it is recognizing I've got to do something different, and that really changes that mindset of, okay, I'm just existing today, or I'm just status quo today,
I'm waiting my
to getting
turn.
to that. Right. Yeah, I mean, that really what it comes down to, you identifying that, hey, I need to make a change, I need to do something different. And that's really what happened to me when I even started my education journey, was the fact that, I think you even said it, I wanted to have more responsibility. I was a mechanic, but I wanted to also be, in a decision making process. And how do I do that? I have to be some type of leader. But to become a leader, I have to have an education, because then people might take me seriously, but not, uh, you know, hoping or waiting for my turn was not an option for me. But it really came down to making that decision for myself. And I think that's the challenge most people have, is they don't recognize that they're, just reached their plateau, or they're being mediocre right now. So I think that's, even when I have conversations with people that are working at an organization, and I've said this many times on a lot of podcasts, the fact that they don't recognize, that they need to advance, or that they need to move forward. It really is, it comes down to you recognizing that you need to do that, because we can tell people all day, hey, what happens tomorrow? Everything's great today, but what happens tomorrow? What if you get laid off? What if the company closes? What are you going to do then? So that's typically when people figure out, oh, I've been, plateaued for a long time. I didn't recognize that until some type of event occurs that forces them to think that.
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest challenge for most people, is evaluating where they are. And I think that goes back to, we've said it so many times before, that critical self reflection. Where are you trying to go? What do you want to do? And you explained that process, that you had to start with identifying that you had plateaued, that you wanted more. And you recognize, I'm not going to get it here. I've got to move on. So that came from you having that conversation with yourself, that serious conversation, not, just looking at the only the parts that you wanted to see, but you had to really dig deep and say, hey, I'm not going to get it here. I've got to go out on a limb. I got to get out of my comfort zone. All those things come into play when you really start thinking about, okay, have I plateaued? You got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And once you do that, then you're open to, okay, what do I need to do? Then, research or whatever. Like, you just explained the process very well. Figuring out, hey, I may need some certifications. I've got education, but is it the right education? So what else do I need to do? And that's when that process starts. When you identify, hey, I've plateaued. I want to go somewhere else. How do I get there? You start asking yourself those questions.
Joe, I want to pick up on something that you said, which is imperative. You talk to a lot of people, you've said several times throughout all of our podcasts. Many, many people throughout your career, probably thousands, I would speculate. And you help them realize. And that reminds me of when I was doing college recruiting, and we've talked about this example before about, well, if you wait another 6 months, that's potentially 6 months of lost
Yep.
income.
Yep.
Well, what about if in your career, that next step up, you don't need a college degree. You don't need a certification. You just need to take the initiative. talking to the right people, like you said. We've helped so many people throughout our careers by just talking to them, saying, why don't you apply for that promotion? Well, that's more responsibility. Well, not really. You're doing the same thing. You're just getting paid more for it, you know, and you still get the same amount of time off. Or yeah, you're going to apply for it, but you're going to do this and this and this what you want to do. Why the delay? And that's really at the crux of mid progress plateau. Why are you not doing what you need to do to get to that next level where you want to be? It could be just as simple as networking. It could be as simple as having a conversation with your supervisor or your leader or your manager or your mentor or your coach or someone else that understands you and believes in you to help you recognize you have that potential. Hey, I'm going to call it out. You've kind of plateaued here. What are you thinking? Tell me what your thoughts are. And having that conversation.
Dave, what you just said is I've been in those scenarios multiple times. The fact that people might say, "Hey, what do I need to do?" You brought up networking. That's an option. Talking to your manager or your boss and telling them, "Hey, this is my intent. This is what I want to do." That's another option for people to not really know if they've plateaued, or again, people that know you well may say, "Hey, you excel at this. Why aren't you doing this, or why haven't you tried that?" So it does take sometimes people looking from the outside and seeing your abilities that you can't see yourself. So sometimes it does take that external, uh, connection that they can see things you can't see. So that's also important. That you, I think one of the main important things that you should do is talk to those people that have either your manager or someone that knows you well and has your best interest in mind, or maybe you don't have that all the time, but that's a start. If you have somebody just pulling for you in your corner, reach out to them if you're struggling with identifying, because they may come back. Hopefully they're going to come back and tell you, "Hey, yeah, I see that. I think you could be doing this. I think you should try that." And sometimes that's what it takes, that little bit of push. You're already kind of there thinking about it, but somebody else helping you with identifying those things for you. So good points.
So I'm going to say at this point, it's about time to bring out our weekly
I
challenge.
think so.
And our weekly challenge for this week is identify three things that have led to your plateau. Whatever progress plateau you're in, career, personal, professional, whatever. Identify three things that have led to your plateau, then establish, not just identify, establish. That means take action, folks. Establish processes that you can implement to regain your momentum, to step up off that plateau. So it's kind of a two-part: identify three things that have led to your plateau, and then establish and integrate three processes that you can implement to regain your momentum. And it can be, and this is oversimplifying it, identify, revisit, reevaluate, reimplement. IRR to the third. I don't know. So we'll come up with something with that. So that's your weekly challenge for this week. Yeah, and remember we have the weekly journal on our website. It's a free downloadable, fillable PDF to help you track your weekly challenges. We've also got an initial assessment. If you like that one, it's a short, sweet one. You can do the more detailed assessment, again, at no cost. These are just three tools that we put out there to help you with your career, with your momentum, with your mid career professional working environment to develop yourself. Just they're really great tools. Use them. They're there. They're there at your disposal. If you don't think there's any value because they're at no cost, then contact us and we'll let you pay for them. We don't care, but something to where you actually use them. So,
Dave,
yeah,
I was
I'll
just going to I was just going to touch on the weekly challenge. I know you said identify three things. If don't get hung up on that, if you
yeah,
can only come up with one, then go for that as well. Or
absolutely.
even when you establish the process, if you can't think of three, that's fine as well, because it really just takes one step every day, one
Yep.
step forward every day. And again, it could be as simple as you're struggling to get out of bed, you roll over, put that one foot on the floor. So again,
Exactly.
it can't doesn't have to be complicated or
Monumental.
extraordinary.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just those simple things that help you gain that momentum, and that's what it's all
I'm
about.
glad you
Because
clarified that, Joe, because we like to overreach and challenge. That's why we call it the weekly challenge. But sometimes it's a challenge just to do one thing, and that's
yep,
okay.
yep,
You
yep.
know your parameters. As long as you're trying, as long as you're pursuing, as long as you're listening and working on these weekly challenges, that's what matters to us because
You're going
now
to
you're
move
moving.
forward.
Now you're
Yes,
moving.
absolutely. Well, Dave, did you have any final thoughts for our topic today? Navigating the mid progress plateau. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
If I said anything more right now, I think I'd just be just beating that shoe against the floor for no reason, aside
Okay.
from making noise. So I'm just gonna call it good there and just let our audience know that you can do this. You've got it. You've got our support. You've got our love and positive energy going out to you. You can do this, folks.
All right. Well, the only thing I'll add again is like they said, I want to add anything additional, but just remembering that it's up to you. Sometimes that is a little difficult to again look in the mirror and say I need to change, but it doesn't have to be this drastic change. Just that one simple change and start that momentum, and eventually you'll look up and you succeeded. So that's all I wanted to add to that. But so again, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. Again, me and Dave enjoy doing this. So if there's any topics you want to hear from us or anything you want us to discuss, then please reach out to us. Again, we'll respond. Uh, and if you know anybody who might benefit from this podcast, then feel free to send them the link or introduce them to the podcast. So, with that, as always, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary.